I'm coming.
Hey folks, Josh here, and you might know me as the steward of Rugged Ridge Forest, where we craft wood-fired, organic, pure Vermont maple syrup. You can try some for yourself by heading on over to ruggedridgeforest.com. In this video, we're going to show you the whole process of catching, harnessing, and hitching up our team of percheron standardbred crosses. As you can see, our horses are really easy to catch. They like the attention, and they even enjoy the work. And when they know that there's good things on the horizon, such as a bucket of grain or a walk out to pasture every time I come in with the halter, then your horses are always going to be easy to catch and stick their nose right into their halters. Navigating a handful of horses through a gate, especially when you're trying to leave one horse behind, is quite the acquired skill. But as long as your horses are gentled, halter broke, and are good at giving to pressure, it's really not too much trouble to shuffle them all around and handle them smoothly and softly. As you can see, our horses are also very good with the dog around. I try to keep as many distractions around and try not to pay them much heed when I'm working with the horses. I figure if they're exposed to a lot of distractions and different things going on, then they won't be surprised by additional distraction or when new things go on. Here I am putting Hugo on the right side of the hitch. It's customary to put your taller horse on the right side. That's because the roads are crowned, and that way they shed water off of them. So there's a little bit of a height discrepancy between the middle of the road and the side of the road. By putting your taller horse on the right side, they'll stand a little bit closer to shoulder. Now, I don't have a perfectly matched team, and so I have to make this accommodation. A lot of folks like their horses to be perfectly matched in size and gait, and of course that's the ideal. But I find running a mismatched team allows me to have two different diverse horses and it keeps things interesting. It's always good practice to start by picking your horse's hooves, checking the condition of their shoes, and making sure that there aren't any rocks stuck in their hooves. Our horses are very used to getting their hooves picked and working with them all the way around, and that makes it much easier for yourself and the farrier and the horses as well to be familiar with you handling them on all four corners and working on all sides of them. Another reason why it's important for the horses to be comfortable with us picking up their hooves is that if they ever get tangled in their harness or if they step over their trace chains, we might need to go in and untangle them. That might involve lifting up their rear hooves in a chaotic situation, and so having that level of familiarity and trust is really paramount to having a safe interaction with the horses in harness. One thing that I'm very particular about is picking up the horse's hooves gently and placing them back down when you're done with them. The horse is going to get much better at holding their hooves up for you if they trust that they just have to follow your guidance, and they're going to be very light and soft in your hand if they know that when you're done with them, you're going to place them down. A lot of my friends will drop the horse's hoof when they're done working with it, and that just gets the horse on edge and they don't trust you to really handle them gently. And so I'm very particular about picking up my horse's hooves and then placing them back on the ground when I'm done with them, and that just keeps my horses super gentle and super responsive to the subtlest cue. I can definitely feel the tension in other horses whose hooves aren't handled so gently, in that they feel responsible for holding the weight of their foot up, and then you can't manipulate the hoof as much in your hand, which is a lot harder when you're banging shoes on. So pick them up and put them down softly. After picking their hooves, it's time for a quick brushing. And it doesn't have to be too elaborate. I just like to knock all the dust off and clean them up a little bit so that way they look a little bit better and all of that fine dust won't get ground into their fur, causing them to itch. So just a quick once over, knock off the schmutz, and it shouldn't take very long at all. Here I am just admiring Hildy's top line. She's beautifully built and really strong, and her spinal erector muscles on either side of the spinal ridge stand proud of the rest of her back, and she's just really well built and looking really good. I'm also loosening up her halter in order to put her collar pad on. The collar pad allows the collar to be a little bit more comfortable, and it also fits a little bit better with the collar. So we run collar pads with our collars, although they're not necessary. You have to oversize your collar slightly when running a collar pad. I think I heard oversizing about an inch is customary compared to the measured collar size, but we run them just because I think they're going to be more comfortable for the horse. And here's a little trick I actually picked up from the movie War Horse, where I put the collar on upside down over my own head, make eye contact with the horse, and then slip the collar over the horse's eyes and ears. By putting the collar on upside down, I can clear the eyes and ears easier, and then I spin it over at the top of the neck and then put it down onto the pad. Then I clip the collar to the pad, and then she's ready for the harness. It's important to make sure that the collar fits correctly and it doesn't choke the horse. So you should be able to fit at least a flat hand, if not a clenched fist, in the throat of the collar between the horse's trachea and the leather itself. You also want to make sure that it sits at a natural angle where the collar is going to bear on the strong shoulders of the horse. That way they can comfortably apply their power to the collar. The first time you try this with a new horse, it might take a long process of desensitizing them to each individual piece. But for Hugo and Hilde, who are pretty calm and familiar with the process, this is never an issue. Hugo's been really starting to come into his physical self this summer. He's 4 years old, and when I got him at 2, he was scrawny and skinny, just kind of running around with the herd. And since then, it seemed like he was growing an inch a month in height, and he just put on a lot of height the last year, and here he is settling down in height and really starting to fill out. And he's a little bit long and lean and slightly narrow in the chest, but he's really starting to look good and developing into a really handsome horse. And here comes the harness. Now, whenever I put on a harness or take off the harness, I try to keep it aligned in a line the way it goes onto the horse. So that way I kind of slip my arm under it and stack up the different elements so that all I have to do is pull them back and then the harness is already set up. So I throw the hames over the collar, pull back the saddle portion as well as the spider and then the breeching, put the tail over the breeching, and it's as easy as that. You don't have to worry too much with too many settings. You leave it all set up to the size of the horse that it's fit to, and once the hames are over the neck and the tail is over the breeching, I then reach around and tighten the strap at the base of the hames. That's the most important strap on the whole harness, and that keeps the hames from sliding back over the collar and allows the horse to transfer its power into the collar and therefore into the hames. The final step is to reach under the horse and tighten the girth. Unlike with the saddle, the girth on the harness can be very loose. It's not holding any weight, nothing's bouncing around on it, and so it's really just to keep everything in line on the horse. These style of harnesses are called side backers, and that means that the breeching goes to a strap that runs along the side of the horse, and then it attaches to the neck yokes in order to transfer loads backwards. The alternatives are belly backers that run straps underneath their bellies and through their chest to connect to the neck yokes, and New England Ds, which are kind of interesting. They have a few more parts and a D ring in the middle that kind of tie the saddle in with the traces. Um, I like the side backers because I think that they're relatively simple and they have the fewest superfluous fittings on them. And as you can see, quick as that, Hugo's already harnessed up. And because he's a little bit of a bigger boy and harder to throw the harness over, it's going to take me a second to get his hames over his collar. Though the harnesses might look rather complex, they're actually the simplest that we've been able to come up with to take a horse and apply its power to the task at hand. And so conceptually, the chains at the back hook to the load. Those are called the traces. The trace chains then hook onto the tug strap, which is the strap that connects to the chain. And those are directly connected to the hames, or those stainless steel bars that go alongside the collar. Horses cannot pull, they can only push. And so the collar pushes up against their shoulders, and then they're able to lean into that collar and push forward. By pushing into the collar, they're applying power to the hames, which add a frame or a structure with which they can pull. Then those hames drag the tugs, which drag the trace chains, which then drag the load. The breeching, which is the horse's butt strap, serves the opposite purpose. That is a brake to then slow down or stop the load. The breeching is held up by the spider, which is those straps that all come together just above the horse's tail. And then the side straps that go from the breech past the hames come to a little hook. We'll hook those into the neck yoke, and that way the horse can both stop the load with its butt and push the load with its shoulder. Here I am slipping the bridle and the bit into Hugo's mouth and over his head. Whenever I put a bridle on, I always try to make sure I do a good job of clearing the horse's eyes and ears. I like to frame one eye in the bridle, get it up over its ear, usually the left ear and the left eye. Then once the bit is comfortably seated in the mouth, I then reach both hands over to the other side so that I can give a little clearance to the eye as I get the other ear tucked in. And that just means that you're not going to stick your horse in the eye when you're bridling them. As you can see, I'm gently applying pressure to Hilde's side, and she's moving over, and that's giving a little bit of room to both me and the cameraman. And then here you can see me framing that eye. And so the strap of the bridle is going right over her forehead, and then I use my hand to then clear the other eye and ear as it goes over. Sometimes I'll also stick my thumb into the horse's mouth where the bit goes, and that'll get the horse to open up their mouth if they're being a little bit stubborn and don't want to take the bit. Because horses don't have teeth there, you can stick your finger in there pretty safely without getting bit. Now, of course, a mean horse could always bite you, but good horses like these, they'll take their cues gently and be good for us. Now that the bridle is on, I'm hooking up the drive lines. And what's interesting about team lines is that they're actually a little Y. So there's the long strap that goes from the left hand to the left horse's left side of the bit. But then about 3 or 4 feet from the bit, it splits into a second line that then feeds through a loop on the hames and then goes to the other horse's left bit. And those lines have to be balanced for length for your team so that when you apply pressure to the left line, both horses are getting pressure on the left side of their bits simultaneously. And we also have that little ivory ring that was given to me by a mentor of mine, Jay Kimball, a renowned horse logger in this area. And his grandfather used to keep that ring on his driving horses. And that ring is really more aesthetic than anything else, but it does keep the lines from getting tangled, and it does keep uh, everything looking a little bit better. And as I say that, the ring is tangled in Hugo's ears, but goofball that he is, it doesn't bother him none. Here he is just giving a little yawn to get the bit adjusted properly in his mouth. Now that the lines are set, I'm taking the long length of the line and tucking them into the spider, and that's just a temporary holding position so that as I undo the horse's halters, I can then quickly reach over and grab the lines. And I might be a little bit casual about how I undo the halters and then grab the horse's lines, but my team knows to stand there rather stoically, and so that's not too big a deal for us. Now is also a good time to look at the height of the breeching on the horse's butt. And it's a little bit off kilter right now on Hilde, but you can see that the breeching is actually quite high on the rump. You can see that where the butt muscle protrudes the most, right below the tail, it's just slightly below that. But basically, if the breeching is set too low, then when a cart applies pressure onto the breeching as the horses try to stop the load, it'll kind of bend their knees and kind of chop their back legs out from under them. So you want that breeching high enough so where it doesn't slide up and push the tail up and over the horse. However, you don't want it so low that it's going to chop them out. So it's very hard to find that Goldilocks spot, but right now they're set up pretty well in my opinion. And as you can see, we're hopping back and forth between 2 days because that first day I was actually going out logging, and so we didn't have to add the neck yokes. So here I'm going to show you attaching the neck yokes. And so you can see that strap with that little hook on the left side I just grabbed. That goes to the breeching. And so the neck yoke is going to keep those straps nice and wide so that they don't pinch the horse when loads are applied. And then between each of those little red neck yokes, we're going to apply the team neck yoke, which will then take both the horses and allow them to join forces in stopping the load. And you can see that ring in the middle of the team neck yoke. That's going to then accept the pole in between a cart or a sled. And so that pole will push into that ring, which will then go down those side backer straps into the breeching and stop the load of the cart. The length of those side straps should be such that when the horses are pulling a load forward, you can see the breeching kind of loose bouncing on their butts. You only want about 4 or 6 inches of play there, because as soon as you ask those horses to stop, you don't want the cart to be then developing a lot of momentum to slam into the horses. So you only really want about 4 inches of extra play visible in the breeching when the horses are working under load. So here we are gathering the lines out from under the spiders. The horses have been let off their halters, and as you can see, they're well trained and standing stoically. And now I'm going to drive them towards the cart. I always like to let them get a good look at whatever I'm about to ask them to do. So here we are, just taking a quick second to stop, get an idea of what's going to be strapped to them. I don't want them to feel like we're hiding anything from them or that they should be surprised by anything they're about to see. And then here we are about to back them up over the pole. Hildy's getting a little bit apprehensive, giving a little bit of side eye. I know everybody in the comments is about to mention how I should have blinders on these horses, but just a little tug on her breeching to straighten her out and get her going in the line that I'm asking her to go in, and she straightens right out. Here I am setting the brake on the cart, and going to put the pole through the neck yoke is probably the most dangerous part about hitching up your team. You're about to have, several thousand pounds of flesh and 2 individual brains in front of you, and you're going to be in a very vulnerable position where if you were to get ran over right now, it'd be very dangerous. So make sure you trust your team and be very careful, and don't be afraid to ask somebody for help if you need it. I obviously trust these horses with my life, and they're being very good for me. And here I am lifting up the pole, slipping the pole through that ring on the end of the team yoke. I'm also putting a carabiner through the pole and the ring so that the neck yoke couldn't possibly slip off. And then here I am asking Hilde to step a little bit closer to her final position as I put the trace chains or tugs into the evener on the cart. Now it's a little bit counterintuitive, but in order to get your horses to stand even shoulder to shoulder, you're going to have longer tugs on your smaller horse and shorter tugs or trace chains on your longer horse. And so that's the benefit of having that chain at the end, is that you can adjust how many links there are. it's important to give the horses enough room in the traces that they're not going to click their heels on the evener when they're moving through a natural range of motion. So it's very important that you size everything appropriately so that the horses can move freely without hitting their heels. And I could have easily made this video 3 times longer, getting into the nuances of how to wrap your lines and how to size the straps for the horses and all of the nuances and all of the small features. But I think this is a good overview. I hope you all found this video helpful. Obviously, there's always more that could be covered, but I hope that this was a good start. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll try to get back to you. And maybe in a subsequent video, I can share more nuance if I knew what people were interested in seeing more about. Additionally, if you wanted to support us and our channel, we'd really appreciate it if you could head on over to ruggedridgeforest.com and grab some of our wood-fired organic pure Vermont maple syrup. We also have some really cool t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hoodies that include an image of Hilde and Hugo doing some horse logging. And so if you wanted to support us through a purchase of any of those items, we'd be super grateful, and we look forward to making more content when we can. Thank you all very much, and we hope you have a wonderful day.